Good evening, and thank you for attending. My name is Leslie Kane, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. Before we begin, please silence all phones and electronic devices. Additionally, please refrain from any interruptions to the debate, as it is being recorded for on-demand viewing and post-captioning services. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor for this evening's event. And the Clean Elections Act is a campaign finance reform and public education measure initiated by Arizona citizens and passed by voters in 1998. The system provides clean funding for qualified participating candidates who agree to abide by the Clean Elections Act and rules. These include contribution and spending limits, foregoing special interest money, and participating in commission debates. We encourage audience questions, so please utilize the note card given to you when you entered the room and hold it up. And our volunteers will pick up the cards and deliver them to me. If you need additional cards, just raise your hand. If you have a question for a specific candidate, please include the candidate's name on the note card, and it will be considered during the second half of the debate. And we do, just so you know, screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. The debate is scheduled for 90 minutes, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we'll do our best. Tonight's debate includes 1-minute opening statements, and the first half of the debate begins with 2 minutes to each candidate to answer the same question. And after all candidates have responded to the question, the first responding candidate will be given an additional 30 seconds. We will rotate which candidate responds first. And the second half of the debate will allow a different question per candidate with 1 minute to answer and an optional 30-second comment from the other candidates. And finally, we will have 1-minute closing statements. We ask that you remain polite to all of the candidates and give them a fair and uninterrupted hearing. No matter how strongly you may agree or disagree with anything being said, please do be polite. Tonight's participants are Ms. Elizabeth Brown, Democratic Clean Elections candidate for State Senator, District 12, Mr. Eddie Farnsworth, Republican candidate for State Senator, District 12, Mr. Joe Bisaccia, Democratic Clean Elections candidate for State Representative, District 12, Mr. Travis Grantham, Republican candidate for State Representative, District 12, and Ms. Lindsay Robinson, Democratic Clean Elections candidate for State Representative, District 12. Now, the order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name, starting with the Senate for opening comments, and will progress from that point. The order for the second half will be determined by reverse alphabetical order by last name, starting with the House. Elizabeth, will you start the opening remarks, please?
Thank you. I would like to thank the Citizen Clean Election Commission for hosting this debate, and I would like to thank all of you for attending and taking time out of your busy schedule. I'm running for the Arizona State Senate because being ranked 48th in K-12 education, 49th in pupil-teacher ratio, and 50th in teacher pay is a travesty, and our children deserve better. As a former teacher, mother of 2 daughters, and grandmother of 4 grandchildren, all of whom have attended public schools, I believe all children deserve a top-notch education. Our children are suffering the consequences of inadequate funding because of the status quo. Hundreds of millions of dollars has been slashed from education and healthcare because of our legislators. It is time to put our children ahead of profit. It is time to elect new leaders who are not bought and paid for by special interest groups. I am proud to be a clean elections candidate. I am running to be a voice for all of my constituents in Legislative District 12. I am not in it for personal gain. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Eddie?
Thank you. My name is Eddie Farnsworth, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm thankful to the Clean Elections for putting this on and for those who are here. I've had an opportunity to serve in the House for a number of years, and my roots in Arizona are deep. I'm a native of Arizona. I grew up here. I married a woman who grew up in Arizona as a native, and we chose to raise our children here in Gilbert. I'm a businessman. I hold a degree in economics, a degree, an MBA with especially in finance and investments, and I also have a law degree. I am a fiscal conservative. I am a conservative socially. I have a record. That record is very clear. It states what I have done in the time in the House, and I look forward to discussing that tonight. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to answering the questions.
Thank you. Joe.
All right, thank you to the Clean Elections Commission and all the candidates that are here as well, and to all you here tonight. My name is Joe Bizaccia, and I'm your candidate for the State House of Representatives. I began my career in journalism and sales, but I found my true passion in education, and specifically in teaching kids how things work. Today, I'm a proud public school teacher in the areas of applied technology and robotics at Cooley Middle School. I'm proudly endorsed by the Arizona Education Association, and I view this election as an opportunity to invest in our public schools and in the future of Arizona. We are still $650 million below where we were pre-recession levels of school funding, and it's time we elect some representatives that are committed to solving this crisis for the long term in a sustainable way. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Travis?
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you everyone in the audience for attending. Great turnout, and it's an honor to be sitting in front of you. And thank you to the Commission for hosting the debate. My name is Travis Grantham. I'm the current House Representative in Legislative District 12. I'm at the end of my first term seeking re-election. I'm also a Republican, I'm a conservative, and I'm fiscally conservative. I'm proud of my service to this state and to this country. I've been a business owner for the last 14 years. I'm a third-generation Arizonan, born and raised here, and I serve in the Arizona Air National Guard. I'm a major and a pilot on a KC-135 here. Arizona is in a great position today. Economically, our state's booming. We have a very free market in our state that's attracting lots of businesses and lots of great people. Our economy's growing, our population's growing for that reason. And I'm proud of the things I've accomplished the last 2 years in the State House. Keeping burdensome regulations low, keeping taxes at a manageable level low, and increasing funding to education, K-12 funding in our state. I look forward to answering your questions. I look forward to being here in front of all of you tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Lindsay?
Thank you. Thank you to Clean Elections for hosting this debate and our moderator. Thank you to all of you for being here as well, and those of you that are watching online. A little bit in terms of my background, I am a former dreamer, and I am a former secondary and elementary school teacher. I am a product of public education, and as such, I recognize the value and the necessity of fully funding our public schools. I have a bachelor's degree in political science and philosophy. I have a master's degree in education and a doctorate in law. As an attorney, I have volunteered with Catholic Charities, and I've worked with legal aid to help the vulnerable among us obtain access to justice. I'm running to put an end to the reign of political corruption, self-dealing, and the overwhelming stronghold that dirty money has on our political process. I'm running to end the charter school corruption and to fully fund our public school education. I'm running so you can take your house back. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll begin the portion of the debate where each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the same question. The first question is for Eddie. Eddie, according to the most recent census data, more than 1.1 million Arizonans live in poverty, including nearly 400,000 children. So how would you help Arizonans and their families to get out of poverty? Or what do you think the role of government should be in helping Arizonans and their families get out of poverty?
Thank you for the question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a free market guy, and I believe that the best way to help everybody with poverty is to give opportunity. And opportunity comes when we reduce the size of government. We allow the free market to create jobs. We allow the free market to then employ individuals so that they can support their families. And so the way to do that is to lower taxes, have a robust economy. We have seen that in Arizona. In the 2000s, under Janet Napolitano, we had excessive debt. We spent way beyond what the state could afford. We burdened taxpayers, and in 2008 we saw an absolute collapse, and it hurt a lot of people. What we have done in the legislature since is to take a very conservative approach, and the result is we have dug out of that problem that we had. We still have the vestiges of debt that exists, but we have reduced significantly that debt. We've been able to increase education funding. We've been able to get people back to work. And that is the solution in my mind. That's the role that the state needs to play, is to have a solid economy so that the free market can create jobs and individuals can work. They then have self-respect, they have the money that they need, and they have the security that is going to allow them to make plans for the future. It's worked. Every time we do it the right way, it works. And if we continue on this path, it will continue to work and people will benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, same question?
Thanks, Leslie. The answer to this question, to me, is quite obvious, and that's investing in education. If we make sure that Arizona has a top-notch education system where every student, regardless of their socioeconomic background, has a chance to succeed, then we'll all succeed. I don't care if you're a student from Central Phoenix, from Yuma, from one of our Native American reservations, or from Gilbert. You deserve a great community public school. And unfortunately, we have too many students that are slipping through the cracks right now because primarily we're still $650 million below funding levels where we were back pre-recession. And that still wouldn't even get us up toward the national average. So this is a huge crisis. We need to adequately invest in this. And hearkening back on to a point Mr. Farnsworth made, you know, I've heard this statement a lot, that a lot of our financial problems the state had back in 2008 were largely due to former Governor Napolitano and overspending. But really the issue at hand is that we have a state income tax code that is really not sustainable. We need to start looking at comprehensive tax reform here at the state level because we're too heavily dependent on sales tax. So thank you.
Thank you. Travis.
Thank you, Leslie. Could you restate the question, please?
Absolutely. According to the most recent census data, more than 1.1 million Arizonans live in poverty, including 400,000 children. How would you help Arizonans and their families get out of poverty? Or what do you think the role of government should be in helping Arizonans and their families get out of poverty?
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The answer to me is truly found in the workings of a free market and in capitalism and in how strong our economy is in our state. You know, Arizona's doing a great job of attracting businesses, attracting population, attracting high quality, high paying jobs. We need to do what we've been doing under Governor Ducey, and we need to continue to deregulate. We need to continue to keep taxes low. We need to continue to invest in the things that government is constitutionally mandated to do, like educate our children and the public safety and necessities that are required of us. And we need to get away from things that we don't necessarily need to be spending money on in government and shift that money towards what we actually should spend that money on. Nobody likes to see anybody in poverty. I mean, there's not one Republican or Democrat up here that wants to see a child left behind or a family struggling to make a living. The best thing we can do is make sure that we're fostering an environment in our state that makes it realistic for people to even come here, get a good job, buy a home, send their child to school, and thrive in a strong economy.
Thank you. And Lindsay, same question.
Thank you. I will second what Jill has said in the best interest of time, but I will tell you that in terms of education being the solution, it is the long-term plan, and I strongly am in favor of that. Being a dreamer, I come originally from a third world country, and so I am only where I am because of the fact that I was able to get quality public education. So that is the long-term solution. But in terms of having a free market, a capitalist society, all that means nothing if you can't put your child through college. What is it that is going to happen to our children when all that can happen for them? The best we can hope for is that they have a high school diploma. We need to be subsidizing higher education. We need to be making education affordable in secondary post-high school education as well. We need to be looking at, well, how do people enter poverty? The thing that breaks my heart the most when we talk about poverty is the fact that 1 out of 4 children in Arizona are living in poverty. And they are not to blame for that. They are in poverty because their parents are in poverty. So we need to figure out, how do we get their parents out of poverty? Who are the people that are most vulnerable to falling into poverty? It is women who are in domestic violence relationships. It is single mothers. It is people who do not have high school diplomas or degrees beyond that. We need to be looking at putting vocational education back into the high school programs so that those people who are not interested or are not capable of going to a four-year institution can have a degree, can have a means of learning something, so that when they get out of school, they have a trade or something that they can do so that they can earn a living and provide for their families. We need to stop gutting the system. We recently cut TANF, temporary housing assistance for needy families. We're not providing the child care and the assistance that parents, single women, need in order to get back on their feet so that they can go to school. We're making it harder and harder for people who are in poverty to make it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Elizabeth.
Thank you. We need to change the attitude of our less fortunate. We need to have more compassion for our fellow human beings. We need to treat them with dignity and respect. We need to provide more shelters with trade schools and education. I think some of our legislatures are out of touch with what is going on in our state. We need more affordable housing. Just because the average income in our legislative district is higher than in other areas, our housing market is starting to get out of control. Young families are having a hard time staying in the community where they were raised. It saddens me that our veterans are not getting the medical help they need. Health insurance is not affordable to many of them. People have high medical bills. Paying these bills that people can't afford, then they have to not pay their other bills. Healthcare is a right. I support Medicare for all. We also need to have strong public schools. We also should invest in free community college. We could implement 2 years of community service towards college. Many of us have heard the phrase, you have to pull yourself up from your bootstraps. Well, we are not supplying the boots, which would be education, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Eddie, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Well, I would respond by this. The issue here is, how do we, for the long run, help people? And I've heard a very distinct difference here. You have the idea that government and taxpayers need to hand out everything to people, or you have the other choice from Travis and myself, that we need to help people by allowing them to have jobs, and you do that through the free market. Free market has worked in the United States for 2 centuries. It wasn't until we started to destroy the free market that we saw that there was no fix. So I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. So next question is, we'll start with Joe. And the question is, what is your position on private prisons?
Okay, well, thank you for the question, Leslie. And just to harken back again to what Mr. Farnsworth said, I don't believe providing a quality public education to every student in the state of Arizona is a handout. I would fundamentally reject that. And in addition to that, I adamantly oppose private prisons. I don't understand how we got to a point in this country where there's a profit margin incorporated with actually incarcerating people. We should be finding a way to reduce recidivism, not be investing in publicly traded companies that tout the fact that they have high rates of recidivism. This is a really, really, really sick industry as far as I'm concerned, and I don't know why the state's investing in it, and it's something that, quite frankly, we shouldn't be investing a single penny in.
Thank you. Travis.
Thank you, Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're addressing prior questions as we answer new ones, I am going to say one thing. Eddie did not say, nor did I imply or say, that a quality education is a handout. Just want to put that out there. Private prisons can work. The concept is no different than a private company that builds your public roads, or builds your public sidewalks, or builds your public sewer system. If you hire a company to do a job, that's a function of government, and they're able to do it at a baseline or cheaper price than our government's able to do it, I do not have a problem with that. Now, that being said, private prisons are a little bit of an exception to the rule, because you have many people who are very dangerous inside of these prisons. And profit isn't always the motivator when you're housing some of the state's or the country's most hardened criminals. Our prison system houses everything from mass murders to people who are drunken drivers. You know, there's a wide spectrum of criminals and criminal activity that goes to our prisons. I think private prisons have their place, just like any other private industry has its place to supplement government and help us save money and operate efficiently. And nobody knows how to do it better than the private sector.
Thank you. Lindsay.
Thank you. When I think about private prisons, I think about the fact that we're at a place in our government where we just want to privatize everything. We want everybody to get rich off of the backs of hard-paying, hard-working Americans. We want people to get rich off of those who have fallen on hard times, those who have made mistakes, and instead of wanting to help reform them, helping to help them get back to society, to be able to become people who can work in society and reintegrate back into society, we rather pay money to criminalize and to keep people in prisons. In private prisons, what we're basically doing is we're paying for empty beds. We can take that money that we're paying to a private prison for empty beds and put that into education. That's one of the areas that we can find the funding source for education. As I listen to our legislators say that during the Red for Ed movement, that we couldn't do any of the things that the teachers were asking for, such as reduce class sizes, such as bring in counselors into the classroom, because the funding source simply wasn't there. Well, here's an area where we can get the funding source to put back into education. What we need to be doing is we need to stop criminalizing nonviolent offenders so that we can make it possible for them to become reformed and to get reacclimated back into society. And when we have a private system, what's happening is that we have those who are at the legislature who are lobbying, okay, for higher criminal sentences for people who are not even violent offenders so that they can basically make more money. That's what's happening. And it's wrong. It is immoral, and it is wrong for us to be doing that. We need to be looking for ways to help people reacclimate back into society. And privatizing everything is not the solution. It's going to hurt our government. In fact, it has already hurt our government. Just look at where we are right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Thank you. We need to do away with private prisons. Too many people are being incarcerated for minor offenses. Why does everything have to be privatized? When it is privatized, there's no oversight. Soon they'll want roads privatized, and then someone can dictate how it's being spent. Mass incarceration is burdensome to taxpayers and drains resources that could be used for education and mental health services and alternatives to incarceration. Arizona spends more money per inmate than they do per student. It is time that we have criminal justice reform. Thank you.
Thank you. Eddie.
Thank you. What I heard up here was a lot of nonsense. Roads being privatized. There are roads that are privatized. They're called toll roads, and they work very well in a lot of states. The idea, I didn't know how long it was going to take before profit came up, and we said it was a dirty word. Didn't take long. There's nothing wrong with profit. Profit works. That's not the question here. The question here is whether there is a role for a private prison within our system. The notion that lobbyists are there to get higher incarceration rates and stricter penalties so that they can make money is poppycock. Poppycock. We actually have gone the other way. Look at the reforms that were put into place this last year. I sponsored 4 bills that reformed them. I sponsored bills that had military courts, sponsored bills in the past that have dealt with homeless courts to make it easier. You don't go to prison for nonviolent crimes until you are already a recidivist. None of this stuff is accurate. So, should private prisons exist? The answer is, it's certainly an option. There are some prisoners I'm not comfortable being in private prison, those who are violent criminals. They should be in state prisons. But if you go back and look at the history of what happened back in the 2000s, we had a population in the prison that was growing. We didn't have the prisons. We had private companies that came in and were willing to bill for the low offenders, and it worked very well. It saved the taxpayers a lot of money, and there is oversight of those prisons. So again, that's ridiculous. There is a place. Government should not do everything. There are things that government should be doing. Violent offenders, government should be housing those in state prisons. There is absolutely a use and a need for private prisons when you're talking about the low-level offenders.
Thank you, Eddie. And Joe, you have 30 seconds to respond.
All right. Well, that was a very interesting exchange right there. I would say that I would say that the notion that there is a role for private prisons, I fundamentally disagree. I just truly do on the actual on the premise. I just reject that. I do not believe there should be any profit margin involved in incarcerating people. I don't care if it was something as minimal as having a small amount of marijuana or something as serious as a violent crime. I do not believe there should be any profit margin in incarcerating anyone, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Travis, we'll start with you. What are your views on the availability of school choice and why? Homeschool, vocational, private, charter, district, etc.
Thank you, Leslie. I want to start off by saying it's really good to hear that there's 3 Democrats on the stage that might actually be against profit and accusing or convicting people of a crime. You know, this is something I fought very hard for, trying to ban photo radar in our state. Here you have for-profit ticketing in our state, and not one Democrat would join me in voting to outlaw the practice of for-profit ticketing with photo radar in our state. So perhaps we'll be able to get that one across the finish line. The question, views on the availability of school choice. I love school choice. My 2 daughters go to a charter school here. I'm a product of public schools in Arizona. I went to the Scottsdale public school system. I had a great experience in my schooling. I am so grateful that I'm able to choose, my wife and I are able to choose whatever school we want for our daughters. And we have done that. We attended private school for some time, we attended a public school for some time, and now we're in a public charter school. Quite honestly, I think the charter schools speak for themselves. There's a reason people are flocking to charter schools. They do a great job of educating our children. And guess what? They do it for less money per student than district schools, and they do it consistently year to year. And there's a reason those schools are growing. And by the way, many of our district schools are doing a great job. We have numerous district schools that have large populations and a lot of kids that go to them, and very devoted teachers that work there. Good for them. But a little bit of competition is a good thing. It reminds everybody that there's an option if they're not doing a great job at educating our children. And I'm a huge supporter of school choice.
Thank you. Lindsay.
If you would please repeat the question. Thank you.
Absolutely. What are your views on the availability of school choice and why? Whether it's homeschool, vocational, private, charter, district.
Thank you. So I have 3 children ranging from high school, and my youngest entered kindergarten this year. 2 of my children attend the Higley Unified School District, and 1 of my children attends a charter school. He's been in charter school for, I want to say, roughly 5 years now. So as a parent, I support parents having the choice, or parents having the right to make the decision as to what schooling is best for their child. I think there is a place for charter schools in our community, and I support parents having that choice. Here's what I'm against. I'm against charter schools raping our taxpayers so that they can become multi-million dollars, so they can make $1 million off of our taxpayers. That's what I'm against. Mr. Farnsworth's for-profit Benjamin Franklin Charter School has $3 million in stockholder assets and $6 million in working cash, and there's more money to be made by him, which I will let his opponent discuss if she chooses. The issues that we have with charter school have to do with accountability and transparency. Charter schools need to be on the same level of playing field as traditional public schools. Currently, charter schools have a school board, but the school board, their charter board, can't do anything other than talk about curriculum. They don't monitor spending. They don't have anything to do with, they don't audit the charters for money that's being spent in the classroom. They don't require charter schools to follow procurement and gifting requirements. They don't require charter schools to make operational decisions for the funding of their schools. And so there's a huge problem here. And the problem is that when charters first started out, at least in my understanding, the idea was that they were supposed to be for innovation, and they were supposed to help the traditional schools by bringing that innovation to them. But that's not what we have going on in the East Valley. In the East Valley, we have charter schools that are profiting off of our taxpaying dollars while our schools are in a financial crisis.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Parents do have the right to choose, and I do support that. However, charter schools need to be held to the same accountability as public schools. Charter schools receive public tax dollars. They receive your tax dollars and they receive my tax dollars. It is time to have transparency in charter schools. This last legislative session, HB 2866 was passed. This allows charter school owners to not have to disclose how they spend their public tax dollars. They do not have to require how much they pay teachers or how much they spend on books or any of their other expenses. I do not know of any sectors of our economy that receives taxpayers' funds and do not have to disclose their finances. They do not have to publicize school board minutes. In fact, some charter schools only have one school board member. Some owners are running a public charter school supported by taxpayers for their own personal profit. Some charter school owners are personally making millions of dollars off of our tax dollars. Some charter schools have been closed because some charter schools were closed and the owners walked away with millions of dollars. In fact, anywhere from $12 to $30 million. That's how some of the charter school owners have made in the past. Arizona charter schools can be established anywhere. They can even be established by an A-rated public schools. Charter schools are the only state agency receiving public funds that are not monitored by the Auditor General. Exemptions from procurement and gifting allows charter schools to take bribes and kickbacks. They do not have to follow the curriculum guidelines public schools must follow or Arizona state certified teachers. These are just a few examples of how charter schools are not held accountable to the same laws as public schools. And I just feel that it's time that they have the same laws as public schools since they're getting public money. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Eddie?
Once again, I think there were one or two pieces of truth in there, and the rest of it was just kind of made up. That charter schools are raping taxpayers? Seriously? There's an entire agency called the State Board for Charter Schools that is exclusive responsibilities to oversee charter schools. If you actually read the statutes, 15-183, charter schools were set up to be private companies. They were set up so that they would take the risk. The intent was to put it into the private sector and create a competitive model. It's all in there. I don't have time to read it all, but it's all there. Charter schools are not doing anything illegal. They are actually following the laws that was set up. This idea that there's no other sector that makes money and doesn't disclose, are you kidding me? Let's just talk about education. Education's big business. How much money do you think that the curriculum developers are making in schools, district schools? Tens of millions of dollars every year. They sell them. They are for profit. How much money do you think that Bluebird and Thomas make when they sell buses to schools? Only schools buy school buses. They're for profit. They make millions of dollars. What about the construction companies that build schools and get taxpayer money? They're for profit. They make millions and millions of dollars. In fact, my opponent in the primary, he works for a company that builds charter schools that makes millions and millions of dollars, and yet he was accusing me. I've been open. I've been transparent. The reason you know what I have, as was stated earlier, is because it is transparent. We do annual audits and supply those to the State Board of Education. We do performance audits. We do special ed audits. Pretty much everything that has been said here has been wrong. I would suggest that you read the statutes and you understand what the law says before you start going out and making accusations that are not true, because they are not true. I just named a few. If I had 2 hours, I couldn't name all of the people and companies, for-profit companies, that make money providing services to education. So it's ridiculous what's being said here. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Joe?
Gee, this is a lot of fun, isn't it? Oh, wow. Okay, well, where to begin? So first of all, the notion of school choice, and there is there's a misnomer that's out there that Democrats are opposed to school choice. If you actually read the Maricopa County Democratic Party platform, we actually support school choice. So I would encourage everybody that thinks Democrats are anti-school choice to go read the Maricopa County Democratic Party platform. It's literally right in there. So that's number one. Number two, since 1992, 42% of charter schools in the state of Arizona have failed. So, from my perspective, I just look at it like this. Where is all that money going? What's happened to all those students? Who is held into account for all that failure? And instead, we've continued to deregulate, reduce oversight, and basically, as the Washington Post put it, have the most corrupt charter school system in the entire nation. That's what they said, and I agree with them as well. We do have a charter school system that plays a role. We do have charter schools that are operating very well and are serving our students, but we also have charter schools that are not serving our students well and are not serving our communities well as well. And I believe that they should be held accountable for that. And in addition to that, some of the issues we've heard about, particularly about some of the charter schools in the area here, the one Mr. Farnsworth did own and manage. The issue at hand was, well, they have stated that everything that he did was legal. In terms of switching that over to a nonprofit, having the state take it over. And the issue at hand is not whether or not what was done was legal, but whether it ought to be legal or not. And I don't think that should be legal. And in addition to that, I don't believe people that have a vested interest in charter schools should be writing the legislation for them. That to me, that sounds really wrong.
I didn't write any legislation.
Thank you.
Show me the legislation I wrote.
And Travis, you have 30 seconds to
piece.
respond.
I was going to pass, but I'm going to say something that I know Eddie would like to say. He's never written charter school legislation that does what you're accusing him of.
Exactly right.
So
Never
again,
happened.
we're dealing with a great amount of misinformation up here. And what bothers me the most is you have individuals who stick their neck out and borrow tens of millions of dollars to build massive facilities like a school, not on taxpayer money. There's no taxpayer money when the charter school builds its school or buys the land to build its school on. And that's money the state does not have to spend. And the fact that they can educate children for less money per student than a district school and still do it profitably and well makes me proud to live in a state where we have school choice and charter schools available. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Next question.
Can I?
What?
No.
Okay.
No, we're going to move on to the next question. And we're having fun.
All right.
So, starting with Lindsay, what do you suggest be done when it is agreed we don't have enough water to supply all the lovely houses we've built?
Okay. Can I just say quickly that I watched during the Red for Ed movement when the teachers were asking for additional funding while they were debating the governor's 20 by 20 plan. I personally saw Mr. Farnsworth stand on the House floor and say that when taxpaying dollars gets to his hand, that money is private money and cannot be accounted for, and he should not have to account for what he does with that money. And that is on record. Anyone can go and watch that recording. Right. Now, in terms of the water, I think that Lake Mead is basically 2 feet above levels needed to trigger for us to have a forced restrictions. That is concerning. And I think what we need to do is we need to basically, we must be a part of the table for the discussions, for the negotiations of the Colorado Compact. And we have to try to retain partisan on this, because we do have partisan support for this issue. I was concerned that the governor tried to rush through this bill, I feel, because he didn't bring all the necessary parties to the table, such as the business community, locally elected water board officials. And I think that ultimately what we need to start doing is we need to start educating our communities about what we can do to be more fiscally, not fiscally, to be more conservative when it comes to water. There are steps we can take to help conserve water, and then the legislature needs to take greater steps to make sure that we are part of the conversation, that we are meeting with the Bureau of Reclamation, and that we are we bring all the parties necessary, all the stakeholders to the table in order to bring about a positive resolution for Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Elizabeth.
I am a steward of the earth. We are at a near Tier 1 shortage, which means forced water restrictions for all of Arizona residents. There are homes in southern Arizona that when they turn on their water faucet, dust comes out. Between the drought and water table dropping and the springs drying up in southern part of the state, it could eventually look like the Sahara Desert. We could be one big ghost town. This drought threatens the very existence of our communities. We must be mindful. We need to have wise planning. We need to ensure there is a sustainable water supply. It is crucial we bring in engineers, environmentalists, state legislatures from both parties, local water board members, and other stakeholders to the table. We need to have a seat at the table to be part of the negotiating Colorado River Compact. If we do not act on this crisis now, our most precious resources will dwindle. We live in a desert, the Sonora Desert. We do not live up north in Flagstaff where they get rain and snow. So it is crucial that we start paying attention to our beloved desert. I don't want to leave here. Thank you.
Thank you. Eddie?
Thank you. And since we're taking the time to take shots at previous questions, I'm going to talk about a couple things because what Lindsay said is absolutely true. And being an attorney, I thought she would have read the law so she'd understand why I said it. In 1994, the legislature, long before I was ever there, passed a charter school legislation that in 15183 created the opportunity for the state to engage in contract with private individuals and private organizations, including for-profit. They also said that the charter schools, any charter school or any property accumulated by a charter school would remain the property of the charter school. 15183T. 15183S, charter schools may pledge, assign, or encumber their assets to be used as collateral for loans or extensions of loan. 15185BS, they cannot levy taxes or issue bonds. Why? Because they're not government entities. And then we go to 15183P, and this is critical, and listen to this, please. Charter school sponsors and this state are not liable for the debts or financial obligations of a charter school or persons who operate charter schools. Charter school operators are private, they take the risk, and therefore, if you understand the concept of transmutation of funds, you'll understand that what I said is absolutely true. Now, to answer the question about water, we are facing a critical drought. There are some things that we can do. One of the things we need to do is we need to prioritize that if we do have a forced reduction in water use, what we have to do is make sure that our farmers have access to the water they need. Right now, they would be the first ones to be cut. That is a policy that has to change. Secondly, we have probably a 500-year supply of brackish water. We need to invest in the technology and grow it over time. It's not critical to do it right now, but we can invest in it over time and look at desalination for brackish water. That's a lot cheaper than it is to do it in the ocean. And if we do that, Arizona will have a 500-year water supply. So there are options. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eddie. Joe?
Okay, well, first of all, again, back on the charter school issue again. I know we're all doing this on and on and on, but I do have to say that charter schools, I believe, are all considered Title I schools in the state of Arizona. No. A lot of them are, and on average, students receive about $2,000 more per pupil funding than a traditional public school would receive for school funding in that regard. So I just wanted to say that the notion that they all are operating at less cost for a taxpayer is not entirely accurate. And when it comes to water policy, I think the governor proved in this capacity, as he has in many other his failed leadership, just locking a bunch of partisan, political actors in a room and saying, get this done, isn't how you solve a critical crisis like sustainable water policy in the desert. I do agree with Elizabeth that the best path forward is to get all the important stakeholders and leaders from both parties in a room and actually create a long-term sustainable policy. If anybody's driven up north toward Nevada and gone by Lake Mead, it's very alarming what's going on up there. This should not be a left versus right issue at all. We can't live in the desert without water, period. I do believe the state should be investing in a path forward for our agriculture industry as well, creating more innovative methods of irrigation for large farmers as well. That will help create more sustainable policy in the future.
Thank you. Travis?
Yeah, absolutely. About these charter schools, I'm just, anyway. Water is an issue near and dear to my heart. I studied agribusiness at Arizona State. I grew up in a ranching family here, and I understand the need. And ag, rightfully so, is very concerned about what lies ahead in water law as more and more homes get built in our desert. But what hasn't been talked about here is environmental policy that has caused a lot of our water shortages. It's not just homes being built, because believe it or not, the way homes are built today and the way water is used today is actually much more efficient than it was even 50, 60 years ago here in the desert. And while we've had a massive increase in population, we've actually seen some pretty dramatic savings in our water consumption based on that growth. Now, one thing we can all do is drive through our forests and we can see hundreds of trees per acre, where there used to be maybe 40 or 50 trees per acre. Those trees are all drawing on our water table all the time. And that is because those forests have been overprotected. They've been allowed to burn when they burn, and they've grown back as very thick forests that require a tremendous amount of water to grow the numerous trees that exist on that land. Doing things like thinning our forests, not clear cutting, selectively thinning our forests is very important. Allowing ranchers to graze our wildlands, vitally important to the water consumption in our state. Revisiting the Groundwater Management Act that we're a part of, which is one of the reasons we have so much water, but not allowing water to be flushed downstream because it's the good idea of the day and it might protect a mosquito or a minnow or some sort of frog or mouse that lives along the banks of a river is a real problem. And desalination is key to this issue. This is done all over the world. Israel does it. They don't have groundwater there. They draw their water and make fresh water from salt water. Arizona should do the exact same thing. And I think in the not so distant future, you'll see that happening here. And that's where I stand on water policy.
Thank you. And Lindsay, you have 30 seconds to respond on water.
Okay. I think that the water issue is a bipartisan issue. I think it's one where we really have a lot of common ground. And so my only issue was the fact that, the governor, I feel, did not bring in all of the stakeholders to the meeting in order to bring about a resolution. And so for me, what I would like to see is for us to be able to do that so that we can bring a resolution to this issue. And I just want to say that there were 13 bills that were introduced to protect charter school accountability just during this last legislation, during the Red for Ed movement.
Thank you.
And the Republican-led majority did not even bother to give it a hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Let's open up the renewable energy conversation a little bit more. Elizabeth, what specific actions will you take to make Arizona the renewable energy leader of the country?
We live in Arizona. We live in the Valley of the Sun. I think that we should start investing in solar energy. There are companies that want to make profit. We could have more jobs. We could invest in new jobs. We could do more training. And so I firmly believe that we should invest in solar energy here in Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you. Eddie?
Yes, I don't necessarily agree with the premise of the question. I think the issue ought to be what is the best mix of energy that we can use, because there are certain things that happen when you use different type of renewable energy that is not cost effective, and you end up spending far more in trying to force renewable energy than you will in using other clean burning fuels like natural gas. So I think what we need to do is say, we live in an area where sun obviously is a very, very available resource. And I think looking at using the sun is a great idea. We're already doing that. It's very difficult. The solar panels are not really cost effective at this point, and there are subsidies that are going on. So we need to continue to look at the technology and try to build a more effective and more efficient solar panel. So those are the things that I think we have a proposition that's out there on the ballot that I think is premature, and I think what it's going to do is simply increase costs, and so I oppose that. But I do think that we need to continue to look at what technologies and then implement them as they become viable and feasible, instead of simply saying we have to have renewable energy at all costs, regardless of the damage or injury that it causes. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, I have a feeling I'm taking a position here that my Republican friends are going to disagree with pretty strongly. The first thing I'm going to do is say that I strongly support Proposition 127. I think that's going to really move our state in the right direction. A lot of people don't know this, but the actual state that leads the nation in solar energy production right now is New Jersey, where I originally am from. And part of the reason that's for is because the state has actually made an investment in it, a novel idea. Arizona gets about 6% of its energy from solar right now. And in addition, I do teach technology and robotics class, and I would say that the technology has advanced considerably, and solar panels are much, much, much more cost effective than they once were, even a decade ago, and continue to go down year by year. And in addition to that, lose my train of thought a little bit. So I do support solar energy, and that's something the state needs to invest in. I remember now. I apologize. New Jersey also, in addition to having a lot more of its energy produced by solar, their household cost their energy cost per household is actually considerably less than it is in the state of Arizona right now. So the lies that you're seeing that are largely being funded by APS, which has a vested interest in not seeing renewables take off in the state, I would say that you should do a little bit more research before you make up your mind on all those vote no on Prop 127 commercials.
Thank you. Travis?
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and agree with the commercials and say vote no on Prop 127 right now. It's not good for the state of Arizona, and it's going to drive everybody's utilities bills through the roof if something like that gets passed. And then what a lot of people don't understand about these initiatives and propositions in our state is that if something like that gets made law, your elected officials, Democrat or Republican, can't change that. It's forever. And it becomes extremely difficult 50 years from now, 100 years from now, to ever affect any real change if that law doesn't fit anymore. It's actually quite dangerous to see something like that coming down the pipeline and potentially being put into law without going through the legislative process. The renewable energy question, I mean, everybody loves renewable energy, right? I mean, I wish renewable energy was so affordable that we were all on it and the whole state was 100% renewable. It's not reality right now. The technology's not there. The cost of supplying the grid and the panels and everything else we've talked about up here just isn't a reality. Where I have a real problem with the renewable energy discussion is when I start hearing things like we should invest in. Well, I'd be very curious to hear what that means. We should invest in renewable energy. I'm assuming that means your tax dollars, whether you agree with it or not, should be spent on renewable energy at any cost, at all cost. I have a real problem with that. I think the free market should drive where our energy comes from. And I believe with my heart that over time, Arizona will move towards more and more renewable energy because the sun shines here nearly all year round. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Thank you. You know what really worries me and concerns me? When I watch voters $270,000 voters signed for initiatives to outlaw dirty money off of the initiative of outlaw dirty money on the ballot. An overwhelming number of voters signed for the initiative to get the Invest in Net initiative on the ballot. Voters have also signed to get the Prop 127 on the ballot. And then what we have is we have two of those propositions already taken off the ballot And basically, it's a total disregard for the will of the voters. And with Prop 127, we already have a preemptive bill that basically states that if solar passes, a lot of these companies basically just have to pay a small fee and not have to cooperate. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. What the legislature is doing is it is basically figuring out a way to legally bypass every single thing that the voter wants to happen in our district, in our state. What you want and what you care about does not matter to them. And the reason it does not matter to them, in my opinion, is because for the most part, they're in this for themselves, and they're in this because they are being funded by dark money. And that's the bottom line. Because a lot of the things that they do not make any sense. We are the solar capital of the world. We should have solar energy because this is going to protect our families. It's going to protect our homes. It's going to bring in the jobs that we need, that we desperately need to fund the economy, to get the economy going, and to invest in higher education. And yet, it's a no for them. I wonder why. Thank you.
Thank you. And Elizabeth, your 30-second response?
Okay, voter initiatives are not forever. Clean Elections was a voter initiative. And every year, our state legislature wants to take something away. I'm proud to be able to run on Clean Elections, but they keep dwindling it away, and pretty soon there probably won't even be clean elections if they get their way. We have 296 days of sun in Maricopa County. We should be the solar capital of the United States. In 1983, when I bought my first house with my husband, we had solar panels. I was so proud, but we have not moved forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidates, one of our Boy Scouts in the audience wants to know, Eddie, we'll start with you. Will you support the Army, Navy, the Air Force, and the military?
That's a great question. I do support our military people. We're a self-governed people, and as a result, there has to be sacrifice, and there are those who are willing to stand up and serve the country. I have family members that have served in the past. My father did. I have nephews that are in the military right now, and I'm grateful for their willingness to serve. My seatmate, Travis Grantham, is a major in the Air National Guard. I'm grateful for his service. And so, yes, that's a great question. I'm grateful for everyone who serves, and I do support them with all of my heart. Thanks for that question.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, it's really great to see some Boy Scouts here learning about civic engagement at such a young age. I was really impressed by seeing a young gentleman come in here tonight, so thank you for the question. I would say, yes, I strongly support our military, our active duty, and our veterans as well. Thank you, Travis, for your service. I admire the sacrifices that you personally make in the Air National Guard. But in addition to that, I do believe that as representatives serving in the legislature and those at the federal level, we need to do more to make sure we are serving our veterans and our active duty members with sound policy while they're at home, back and overseas as well. And I think we've seen for quite a while some really bad policy that harms our veterans and active duty service members. So that's something that we really need to get taken care of.
Thank you. Travis?
Yep, go Boy Scouts. Thank you for that question. In order of importance, I'll support the Air Force, and then the Army, and then the Navy, and then maybe the Marine Corps. And I'm going to continue serving. You know, I'm one of the few down there. We have some other members that have served and do serve, but I'm going to continue serving in my military capacity if I'm lucky enough to be reelected. And you know, I've done this 18 years. I hopefully will be promoting soon from Major to Lieutenant Colonel, and you know, it's really nice what Joe said, and it's a lot, I'm sure, like what he does for a profession with teachers and with teaching, where you meet some of the finest people you ever come across who are so devoted to their job and love what they do and are so passionate about it, regardless of how horrible the circumstances may be from time to time. The military is the same exact way, and we're very lucky to have the all-volunteer force we have in this great nation, and I'm grateful to serve in it. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, guys. You know, I was a former Girl Scout, not in this country though, but So I really appreciate the civic leadership. Thank you, Mr. Grantham, for serving our country. And anyone who is here who has served our country, thank you so much for your service and your sacrifice. You know, I was about 19 years old when I walked into the Marine Corps office, and I wanted to sign off and wanted to, serve my country. But I was told it was not my country to serve because I was a dreamer. I was disappointed. I've since then considered it multiple times, but I had children and I decided to go in a different direction. But when I was working in legal aid, one of the things that I did do was work with veterans. And it is so heartbreaking, some of the stories that you hear. It's just really hurtful to know that someone who has sacrificed and given so much to our country could find themselves homeless, could find themselves without the proper health care that they need, that they are turned away from the VA to receive the services that they need. And so I believe that basically what we have to do is we have to start making, we have to figure out what our priorities are. And taking care of our veterans needs to be at the utmost importance to us. And we need to make sure that not one vet goes hungry in this country, not one vet goes without housing, not one vet goes without the assistance and the care that they need, whether it's legal assistance or whether it is housing or any other type of assistance that they need. And I think that that's really important. And we have to find the funding and we have to make it a priority so that none of our vets are ever forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Hello, Boy Scouts. I used to be a Girl Scout leader for 13 years, and I was actually the neighborhood director of Girl Scouts, so I truly appreciate the community service that you do. And yes, I support our veterans, but I must admit I'm a little partial to the Navy. My father was in the Navy, my father-in-law was in the Navy, my son-in-law was in the Navy, many of my uncles were in the Navy, so, you know, go Navy. But thank you for your service. I thank all of the people here in the audience and online watching that were in this service. We do need to take care of our veterans. You know, once they get out, many times they're fallen through the cracks. So we must remember that service is service. And when you're in the military and then when you get out of the military, we truly need to take care of our veterans. And also, I am proud that my nephew got his Eagle Scout, and that has served him very well. So you have many opportunities if you choose to go that route. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And Eddie, your 30-second response.
I don't need a response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at this time, we will transition to the second part of the debate where each candidate will receive a separate question with 1 minute to respond. Additionally, the other candidates will have an optional 30 seconds to address the question. And I would ask candidates that if you are interested, that you would raise your hands or hold a pen up to indicate that you are interested in responding, and I will call on you. And remember, you may still submit questions via note cards and direct them to specific candidates. So the first question is for Lindsay. Lindsay, do you think school boards should be more accountable and their records more scrutinized?
Absolutely. Are we talking about charter school boards, or are we talking about the traditional public school boards? All school boards need to be held to the same standard. All school boards need to make sure that they are using our tax-paying dollars to maximize the ability to educate our children. And in my mind, that means putting the money for paying for our teachers, classroom supplies that are needed, books, and things that are necessary for the class to flow appropriately. I think that the decision in terms of where the money goes resides with the local school board. It's a decision that they have to make because each district is a little bit different and unique in the terms of where the needs are. And so I do not take any issue with the local school boards making those decisions. In terms of charter school boards, they basically, all they do is set policy. They don't have anything to do with the hiring and firing of personnel, setting curriculums, faculty acquisitions. And so I would like to see charter schools take a greater role in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidates, would any of you like to give a 30-second response?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay. Eddie.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to respond to everything that was said because there's not enough time, but what I will say is that Lindsay's absolutely incorrect when it comes to charter school boards. The vast majority of the charter schools, about 95%, are nonprofits. They have boards that actually do account. They have boards who actually do set policy. They do oversee curriculum. They do confirm the contracts. Even in CMO management agreements, the board of the school makes the decision on hiring. Again, I would ask that people actually get the right information instead of just reading the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to give a 30-second response? Joe.
I will just say that prior to the transfer of Mr. Farnsworth's Benjamin Franklin Charter School from private to nonprofit, I do believe, unless I'm incorrect, Mr. Farnsworth, that you were the only sitting member of your charter school board. Is that correct?
Can I respond? That is correct, but I'm not running a nonprofit. If you remember in my answer, I said nonprofits, 95%. Okay. So I was, because I run a private for-profit company. I've said that for 25 years, and so yes, that's exactly right.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to give a 30-second response? Who hasn't responded? Elizabeth? Travis? Okay. Next question would be for Travis. Someone's asking, Tom Rex, an economist with ASU, says Arizona has a revenue problem, not a spending problem. With that in mind, what are your thoughts regarding the governor's promise to cut taxes for corporations?
So is this an audience question? Is that what we're doing?
This is
now?
Coming from our audience.
Okay, absolutely. And who says that Arizona has a revenue problem and not a spending problem?
Tom Rex, economist with ASU.
Okay. Well, Tom's entitled to his opinion, and I would say have at it with thinking that it's revenue and not spending in Arizona or any other state or our country for that matter. The issue of was it corporate tax cuts? Is that what you're getting at here? Like, how are we gonna?
It's saying, what are your? The question at the end is, what are your thoughts regarding the governor's promise to cut taxes for corporations?
Oh, I think the governor is smart to make that promise, and I hope he keeps it, and I'll help him do it if elected to the legislature. The reality is, when we talk about corporate tax cuts, I was a business owner. I owned a Chapter S Corp, and all of the profits of that business flowed through to me on my tax return. So there's corporate profit. And I always took that outside money, that huge amount of profit or small amount of profit. Some years it was tens of thousands, some years it might have been hundreds of thousands. If we were lucky, it might have been millions, and reinvested it in the company, or gave bonuses to the employees, or paid for employee raises, or bought new equipment. That's what corporations do. That's what business owners do. We could give that money to the government, and then we could go do things that are so crony, like the Rio Nuevo project in Tucson, Arizona, where we're developing private land on the government rolls. Those types of things frustrate me. I think we should put a stop to those types of things inside of government, stop spending on things we shouldn't spend on, and we'll have plenty of money to do the things that we're constitutionally mandated to do, like fund education. Thank you.
Thank you. And Joe, would you like to give a 30-second response?
I would. Thank you. I would just like to say that I think Mr. Rex has it completely right. Arizona is a growing population of over 7 million just about right now, and our state budget is roughly about $9 billion. Somehow that is just about exactly the same state budget that the state of Wyoming has, which is a population of about 530,000. So that doesn't make any sense to me. That says we're not serving our population very well.
Thank you. Eddie, please.
Yeah, so let's have 30 seconds. If your goal is to spend, then that's absolutely right. If your goal is to spend, then we're always going to have a revenue problem because your revenue can never stay up with spending. But what we have done, and we have had a reduction in the revenues because of 2008, but it was exacerbated by the Napolitano era in the 2000s where the spending outstripped the growth. And we tried to make adjustments so that those things wouldn't happen. It was opposed by Napolitano, it was opposed by the Democrats, and the result was one of the biggest problems we've had in the history of Arizona. And we've tried to grow out of that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Elizabeth, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I don't understand why everybody or my colleagues want to cut taxes. Well, you know, pretty soon, if we don't have any taxes, a tax base, we will have private roads, private state parks. Everything will be private, and then we'll see who can afford to go to these places when everything's privatized.
Thank you. Anyone else? Would Lindsay? Okay. The next question is for you, Joe. Joe, do you believe that the AZ School Boards Association should spend taxpayer money on political lobbying? And if not, what will you do to stop the practice?
Do I believe the Arizona School Boards Association should be spending money on political lobbying?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, that's a terrific question. So, you know, I'm a huge proponent of campaign finance reform in general. I don't believe that anyone should be spending any money on spending on campaigns at all. I believe it should be left to the individual voters, dictated to a specific amount of money as well. I think what's happened since Citizens United has been a real travesty in this country personally. I personally don't believe corporations are people. I do not believe that money is speech. If money is speech, then only those with money have the opportunity to use their voice. And that to me is fundamentally undemocratic. So I don't care if you're a labor union investing in a super PAC or a private business starting a super PAC as well. I think this whole system is rotten to the core. I would like to see us move to a system where we have completely publicly funded campaigns all the way up to the presidency.
Thank you. And I'd like to offer the other candidates an opportunity to indicate whether or not they'd like to give a 30-second response. Okay.
I will.
Lindsay, why don't we start with you?
Okay. I've been endorsed by End Citizens United, and I can promise you that if I am elected, there is no way that I'm going to allow dark money to continue to flow into our political system. It has just devastated our system. It has polluted and corrupted our system. And one of the things that is happening is that we have politicians who basically are getting dark money, who don't have to disclose the source of the money, who is it coming from. And so when they pass legislation, we really have no way of really knowing who or what is their true motivation behind the policies that they are legislating. Thank you.
Thank you. Eddie, you had your hand up?
Yes, Citizens United actually recognize the constitutional right to express yourself. And I understand there are people who disagree, but there is a right. It's called the First Amendment. And I have a right to spend money to express myself. And so this notion that we're going to go to all taxpayer-funded elections, what that also does is take away my right if I don't want somebody to use my money to express an idea that I fundamentally disagree with. That's tyrannical. That's not even suppression of First Amendment. That's tyranny. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, you have 30 seconds.
I would just like to say that largely the Clean Elections Commission is a publicly financed campaign election system, and I do not believe that the Clean Elections Commission and the Clean Elections program is tyrannical.
Anyone else? Elizabeth?
I understand that, if I had tons of money and, I wanted to help my own campaign, that's fine. But the dark money, we don't know who's investing. We don't know who's giving the money. And I just think that it should be more transparent because lobbyists will give money and then they buy the politician to vote the way they want. So I think that we have a right to know who's donating money. That's all I want. Thank you.
Thank you. Travis, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I just want to clear something up. If a lobbyist gives money, let's say the lobbyist's name is John Smith. John Smith has to turn in his name, his address, his profession, his employer, how much money he gave. And that goes into a campaign finance report that you can all see. So this notion that lobbyists give money and there's no known source, or it's like, and quite honestly, I asked this question down at the legislature in the House this last year when we were debating this. I'm still trying to figure out what dark money is. I mean, is this a different kind of money? Is this like a money that's a darker shade? It's ridiculous implication. And this negative
Thank you.
word attached to a normal political donation
Thank you, Travis.
is insane, and it needs to stop.
Thank you. Next question is for Eddie. Eddie, why did you suddenly sell off your charter schools and make them nonprofit? Inquiring minds want to know.
I appreciate that question. I've run a for-profit school openly and proudly. I've had high-performing schools. My schools have historically scored in the top 10, 15% in performance in the state and have done that for 24 years. But there came a time where I'm now operating. Part of it's because under Obama, the U.S. Department of Education said that for-profit companies cannot take federal money. I never took federal money. I still haven't taken federal money. But the other for-profits in the state converted to not-for-profit. I find myself competing in a nonprofit world, and what I want to do is to create stability for the school in the long run, not in the next 15 years, but for the next 200 years. And to do that, I believe that we can get the benefit in a nonprofit. The properties can go in the nonprofit, and they don't have to worry about having to move because they're using a landlord. What they'll have is perpetual security. That's why I'm doing it, for the benefit of the school, the benefit of the kids.
Thank you. Who would like to chime in? Lindsay, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. So Mr. Farnsworth is leaving out the fact that he's going to stay as a paid consultant for this charter that he is now selling, and he's going to continue to make money off of the taxpayers. We have a real problem here. We need to change the legal laws that make this type of transaction possible. I don't care if it's legal. Just because it's legal doesn't make it right. It's immoral what's going on. Our children are getting hurt, and we have to change this, and we have to change it now. We're out of time.
Children aren't getting
Thank you.
I want to respond
Would
to
anyone
that.
else like to chime in that we haven't heard from yet?
Well, she just accused me of hurting children.
I would like to know how children are being hurt. I mean, I'll give her my time.
Okay,
That'd be
Travis, you have
helpful.
30 seconds.
I think it's a ridiculous and damaging statement that children are being hurt. I'd like her to explain it. That's all I have.
Okay.
She makes an allegation that potentially is criminal if true. Nobody's being hurt. She may not agree with the laws. She may think that they need to be changed, but these laws have been in place for years. I have obeyed every law. I've fulfilled every contract. My schools are high performing. And your reckless allegations are just that, reckless allegations. And I would expect something different from an officer of the court.
Thank you.
No children are being hurt. That's absurd.
Thank you, Eddie. Joe, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would like to defend Lindsay really quickly here, because this is a play on words that Mr. Farnsworth and Mr. Grantham are doing. They're trying to change the conversation because of semantics, and largely the issue at hand is whether this kind of transaction should be legal. So let's not lose sight of what the real discussion here is. We can have petty personal attacks back and forth all we want, but the real issue at hand is, should this kind of transaction be legal, period? The answer is no, in my opinion.
Thank you. Okay. Next question is for Elizabeth. Elizabeth, if President Trump's administration were to rescind Roe v. Wade and it is sent back to the state, how would you vote?
Okay, there's a constitutional amendment that says that women have the right to choose. I do not think the government has the right to tell me what I can do if with my own body. That is a very, very personal decision. I do not think men, have the right to tell a woman what's best for her. That is a decision between the husband and the wife, or the woman. Men, I'm sorry. I just get really upset when we have all these constitutionalists and they say we have to abide by the Constitution. Well, there is a constitutional amendment, and it says that the women have the right to choose. So that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. And would anyone like to chime in? Eddie, you have 30 seconds.
I would like to be able to. Thank you. It is constitutional law. There's no question about that. I think it needs to be changed. I don't think that we're telling a woman what to do with her body. She made that decision when she made a baby. What we're telling them is we believe that unborn children should have the same protections under the Constitution as every other person. And therefore, the decision would be to protect the unborn child. So I support that. Thank you. I would support that we outlaw it if it's sent back to the state. I would vote to do away with abortion.
Thank you. And please allow the candidates their time so that they can respond. Thank you. Joe, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Leslie. I would just say the notion that a woman made the baby. I would say that a man is equally responsible for the making of said baby as a woman is, and I would reject that ideology on its premise. So thank you.
Thank you. And Travis,
Yeah,
you have 30
absolutely.
seconds.
So the man and the woman made the baby. We've solved that mystery. The man should have a say as well. You know, if I was to learn that one of my beautiful daughters could have been aborted, I'd be devastated if I wouldn't. And had no say in it. It's insane to think that a man shouldn't have some ability to speak up for the child he also created. And you know, Elizabeth talked about the woman's right. I get that. I understand where you're coming from with your argument. However, what about the child's right? And I hear sighs and gasps in the audience, which is unfortunate because that tells me that somebody doesn't believe a child's actually a living being until it leaves the womb. That to me is very bothersome. I'm pro-life without
Travis.
exception, and I would look forward to voting to strike it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. The child's right. The child has the right to free, appropriate, well-funded public education. The child has the right to have health care. The child has the right to have parents who can properly care and provide and take care of them. The child has the right to have laws that are passed that help them become the people that God intended them to be, to reach their maximum potential, to reach their maximum ability. That's the right that the child has. And so we're passing legislation that's not even respecting the right of the child after they're born.
Thank you.
No right to life.
And moving on to the next question, which is for Lindsay. Back to you.
Okay.
Which corporate welfare tax exemptions do you support removing and why?
If you could please repeat that question, I want to make sure I understand.
This is from someone in our audience wants to know which
Okay.
corporate welfare tax exemptions do you support removing and why?
So in terms of tax benefits, which ones would I support removing? Well, I would want to look at the entire tax code. I know that we have several corporate tax benefits that corporate taxes that actually benefit our communities, but then we have several that do not. Right now, we have corporations that pay about $50 a year in taxes. So we need to kind of look at that and restructure the entire tax code. What I would want to do is I would want to see our local businesses get the benefit of the bargain because they pay more into our taxes than the corporations do, and they are the lifeblood of our communities. So I would want to see them get the benefits. Remove regulations to help our local businesses flourish because they are what keeps our communities strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to chime in? Eddie, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would oppose corporate welfare. Corporate welfare is actually redistribution of wealth to a corporation that they haven't earned and they're not entitled to. But we haven't done that at the legislature that I'm aware of, except in a few cases, and I voted against those. When we allow businesses to keep more of the money that they have earned and we reduce the tax burden on them, that is not corporate welfare. That is allowing people to keep the money that they earned. So I oppose corporate welfare. I support allowing people to keep more of their own money. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, the very first piece of corporate welfare that I would like banned at the state level is any sports facility that can come into a community and have the taxpayers footing the bill for their stadiums. I think that that's wrong. I think we've seen that at the national level, and we've seen it in communities all across the country. We have an issue with that in Phoenix still, definitely over in Glendale, and I love the Cardinals, and I love the Diamondbacks, and I love the Coyotes just as much as the next guy or gal, but at the end of the day, the taxpayers should not be footing the bill for billionaire owners and millionaire players. That's wrong, and that should be illegal.
Thank you.
We do have something we agree.
All right. Moving on. Travis, question, this next one is for you. Should legislators remove themselves from discussions or voting on issues they have financial investments or interests in?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is in certain situations, of course, yes. If there's something that the legislator is voting on that is so specific to something only the legislator can affect or do, and nobody else really has effect, absolutely. But we have a rule in the House, and we have laws to deal with that here, and those account for legislators who have an interest in a business or a financial entity where there aren't any other interested parties in the state, and the legislator can recuse him or herself in that instance. So the question I think is aimed a little bit more at my seatmate. I'm sure he's going to want to say something, and he'll do a good job of explaining it. I will finish with this. We've heard this a lot because of the charter school debate in our state, but yet when we voted to increase public education funding by hundreds of millions of dollars, we had school teachers who were receiving a raise who voted yes for that increase in funding.
Thank you.
And nobody asked them to not vote. So keep that in mind.
Would anybody like to chime in? Eddie, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I'll just explain it. It's because we're a citizen legislature. Everyone in the legislature has conflicts of interest, whether it's VLT, whether it's property, whether it's business, everyone has conflicts. So the legislature, long before we were there, decided how to balance that is to say if you have a remote interest, then you do not have a conflict of interest. And that is defined by having more than 10 in the class that would be affected. And that's what Travis was talking about. So I don't have a conflict of interest when I vote, but I have not sponsored charter school laws, but I have voted on budgets and other types of policies like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, we're going to move on.
Right.
This next question's actually for you.
Okay.
What can be done to increase the effectiveness of trade education?
Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
The question is, what can be done to increase the effectiveness of trade education?
Oh, that's a great one. I'm the son of a union iron worker. My dad, when he was in high school, his last 2 years, he actually went to a trade school for most of his day in high school. So he actually got out of school with an apprenticeship as a union iron worker. And I think as a nation, we've really moved away from that. I think programs like EVIT are phenomenal, and I think that the state ought to actually invest in those programs and allow more of them to flourish here at the state level. We currently appropriate $0.00 at any community college in the state. We have appropriated a small amount of money to programs like EVIT, but we need to invest more because we actually don't have enough qualified workers to fill these jobs, and we need more people that are ready to get out there and be iron workers and be construction workers and be plumbers and be people that are ready to take these jobs on, because a lot of these jobs pay $60,000, $70,000 a year, and you don't need a college education for them.
Thank you. Would anyone like to chime in? Okay, we'll move on then. Eddie, this next question is for you. Why should the taxpayers accept paying up to $3 million up to $30 million for your charter schools?
Well, that again, that's something people don't understand what's going on. They're not paying for the school. I'm actually giving the school away. I'm taking, and I've asked the State Board for Charter Schools to take the charter that I hold, which is the heart of the business, and move it into a nonprofit, literally giving it away. And so what I'm talking about is my wife and I have the risk of the facilities. We're the ones that are on the hook. I read the statute earlier. The state has no obligation for that debt. They have no burden for that debt. And so what I'm simply asking is to create the long-term stability for the school within the nonprofit, that we sell those at fair market value. Whatever that number is, it is. And that's the reason why. It's not going to increase the cost to the taxpayers at all. The taxpayers pay based on a student count for the education of the children, not for the facilities, not for anything else. So as Bob Robb had in an article in Arizona Republic countering what his colleague was saying about me, which was factually, some facts in there were accurate, but the conclusion was faulty, is that this will not change the cost of education at all, nor put any additional burden on the taxpayers. The risk alone is mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to chime in quickly? Okay, moving on. Finally, last question here is for Elizabeth. What should the legislature do, if anything, to stop the ongoing politicization of within the public schools?
I'm sorry, could you?
politicization within the public schools. What should the legislature do, if anything, to stop that? That's the the politicizing of the public schools.
I'm sorry.
It's an audience question.
I don't really understand about politicizing public schools. I don't think they're politicized.
I think the question is the schools are becoming more politically involved, and
there's a lot
doing
more
things
politics
on the campuses and things like. There's a whole organization has popped up that is saying they want to stop the politicization of the kids in the schools. I think that's what it is. I didn't write it, so I don't know, but that was my
Thank
guess.
you, Mr. Farnsworth, for explaining. Well, I mean, I think
Thank
students
you,
have
Eddie.
a right to their opinion. I think that I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, I was in student government. You know, I was part of student council. You know, we could say what we believed, and I don't see anything wrong with it.
Joe, you'd like to chime in? 30 seconds?
I would. I think I know where this question is coming from as one of the teacher candidates that are running for office here at the state. And I would like to say that as the only person sitting at this table teaching in a traditional public school right now, I would say that the notion that we are somehow influencing the political opinion of our students is untrue. It is untrue. Unequivocally untrue. I can tell you my students are in 7th and 8th grade. Just about the furthest thing from their mind is politics. And if they do ask me about it, I can tell you that the very first thing I say is we are here to learn about STEM. We are here to learn about science, technology, engineering, and math, and specifically about applied technology and robotics. And that is what we are there in the classroom to do, not learn about politics, period.
Thank you. Eddie, did you want to chime in?
Yes.
30 seconds?
Yes, to actually answer the question head on, I appreciate Joe not politicizing, but there are a lot of schools that have. And including in Red for Ed, they were using the students as the markers for that. It's already illegal. Our problem isn't the laws. The laws already say it's already illegal. Our problem is enforcement. I know that there has been a push to enforce, and the law enforcement arms have been very reticent to do so. So in my opinion, if you want to stop it and get back to compliance with the law, they have to enforce it.
Thank you. All right. At this time, we will have our closing remarks, and we will start with Lindsay.
Thank you once again, everyone, Clean Elections, and for everyone for being here. The time has come for us to put the incumbents who switch places to avoid term limits to bed. The time has come to give a blue slip to the incumbents who run for office to game the system to become multimillionaires. The time has come to end the reign of dirty money polluting the will of our voters. The time has come for our charter schools to follow the same rules as our traditional public schools. Our schools must be fully funded, and healthcare must be made affordable for all of our children. We will not get there by electing the incumbents again. We will get the same results. We will be exactly where we are today, if not worse, if they get reelected. If you want to protect the future of your children, you have to elect those who care about their future and those who are not more concerned about lining their pockets at your expense. While our schools are facing critical funding crisis, these incumbents are becoming multimillionaires, and others, like Mr. Grantham, call such practices legal and profitable.
Thank you.
It's time to vote to bridge the gaps and to put an end to this and to take back your house. Thank you.
Thank you. Travis?
Thank you. Leslie, thanks for moderating. You did a great job, and I really, hats off to you. I couldn't do what you do.
We're having fun.
And thank you for everyone who attended. Thank you to the commission. Wow, you know, I was going to just say a couple simple words, but I want to answer a few things. A lot of anger and accusation that is really unfortunate up here. You know, I care about kids. To say I don't, it's just a lie. It's a scare tactic. Pretty despicable. I haven't become a millionaire working in this field. I've lost a lot of money serving the public in the House of Representatives. We make $24,000 a year. I don't go down there and line my pockets. The implication that I'm getting rich doing this is absurd, and it's quite disappointing to hear. But I understand it gets a lot of people excited, and unfortunately some people believe it, and there's nothing we can do about that. But I will say this. I'm proud of our state. I'm proud of where we are today as a growing economy, and I look forward to serving you for 2 more years. And again, I just want to thank you all for coming, and thank everybody who's up here for participating as well. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Travis. Joe.
Well, thank you, Leslie. Thank you to the Clean Elections Commission, to all the candidates and everybody here tonight. I really do appreciate having a very lively discussion about a whole myriad of important issues we have going on in the community and at the state level. Again, my name is Joe Bizaccia. I'm a public school teacher, and I'm humbly asking for your vote on November 6th. I view this election, specifically here in Gilbert and Queen Creek, as a real opportunity to move Arizona forward and vote for the future of our state. If folks are happy with the way things have been going here in our community, which we do have a lot to look positive upon in our community, but there's a lot we can fix as well. But if you don't think anything needs to be changed, then Mr. Farnsworth and Mr. Grantham are your guys. But if you think that we need to make some pretty fundamental changes here to the state, then vote for me, and vote for Lindsay, and vote for Elizabeth. Again, I'm humbly asking for your vote on November 6th, and I thank everybody for being here. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Eddie?
Thank you. I also would like to thank you for moderating. You've done a great job.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm going to spend my time responding to the libelous statements of the young lady down on the end who decides facts don't matter. This is a continuation of what happened in the primary. It's remarkable to me. They talk about how bad I am, and yet, and they want same rules as districts. Does that mean you're going to give charter schools taxing authority? Does that mean you're going to give them immunity from liability? Nobody thinks that through. That's a ridiculous statement, and we shouldn't do it. These laws were passed in 1994, 7 years before I was ever in the legislature. I've obeyed every law. I have obeyed every contract. I have never had an ethics complaint filed against me, and I do not have a conflict of interest under the law. My charter schools perform in the top 20%, 2 elementaries in the top 12%, and my high schools in the top 6%. 20 points higher than the state average and a 96% graduation rate. I've done nothing but be obedient to the laws that were passed before I was there, and yet this kind of vitriol and libelous statement is going to continue. I ask for your vote humbly. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. And Elizabeth.
Instead of looking at the D behind my name, I would ask you to go to my website, brownforaz.com, and to learn more about me. And I would think that we would have more in common than we don't. I will also be accessible to all voters. I will have an open door policy. I will answer phone calls, and I will answer emails. I have had very much trouble in the last 2 years trying to see any of my legislatures. But I promise you that I will be a voice for you, and I will listen to you. I will seek real practical solutions for Arizona, and I will tirelessly support and create policy that will ensure the well-being for all of my constituents in LD12 and for Arizona. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And to all the candidates, thank you so much for participating in our forum. And to our audience members, we thank all of you who took time to come out and inform yourselves before voting. And we encourage you to visit www.azcleanelections.gov/voter dashboard for a customized experience to find information on the general election, the candidates, the issues, and to view this debate on demand. Please do fill out the debate evaluation form and return it to one of our volunteers here. Your feedback is very important to the commission, and it will help to improve future debates. And we thank you all for coming tonight, and you are welcome to stay and speak directly to the candidates. Have a great evening.